you. I'm breaking with tradition a bit tonight. We usually start our teaching time with a Bible passage, but I found myself drawn to just a few verses, so we're keeping it simple, which is also right in line with the theme for this evening. I'm Janelle Wiebe, and people tell me I sound normal. That's the best news of the year for me. I'll never take my vocal cord nerves for granted again, and am extremely grateful for your prayers while I recovered from that surgery at a snail's pace. I start many of my classes with the words, "Okay, can I have your attention, please?" And then, because I'm dealing with humans, I have to sometimes repeat that request a couple of times. Some teachers ring bells, clap their hands, stand on their heads, but eventually everyone clues in, and there is this glorious moment when most eyes are on me, or at least heads are facing the right direction. I'm easy. And I know I have just seconds to grab their general interest. That precious attention feels like it hangs in this very precarious balance, and my competence is measured by what I can do with those moments. I may have made that sound more dramatic than it really is, but I'll admit my day job had an influence on the practice of faith that I chose from Barbara Brown Taylor's book, An Altar in the World. But mostly I chose the practice of paying attention because I thought it was going to be easy. I was mistaken. I thought it was going to be easy because I was under the impression I was pretty good at paying attention. After all, I used to parent young children, so naturally I have eyes at the back of my head. Paying attention to detail, usually pretty good. And as a solid 9 on the Enneagram description of personality types, some of us are familiar with those, I excel at overthinking. Paying attention to excess. Never heard it described quite like that, but it sounded reasonable. Many of you, if I still have your attention, are thinking of ways that you are good at this too. On the surface, we kind of have to be if we value following through on our commitments and our responsibilities. Some of us are even multitaskers, so we pay attention to a few things at the same time and do none of them all that well, if you believe the research. We could have a little debate about that. But Barbara Brown Taylor actually had something else in mind when she wrote this chapter. As a practice of faith, she is talking about paying attention to the here and now, being fully present and dialed in on an average weekday, really seeing people in our path, even the ones that have gotten in our way and are slowing us down. She suggests we move so quickly that our surroundings become no more than the blurred scenery we fly past on our way to somewhere else. The practice of paying attention takes time. It's an intentional choice. It's not something we can haphazardly stumble into. We're mostly short on time, so why would we bother, you might be wondering? Brown Taylor knew you would ask, so her answer, I cannot imagine, unless you are weary of crossing days off the calendar with no sense of what makes the last day different from the next. Unless you are weary of acting in what feels more like a TV commercial than a life. The practice of paying attention offers no quick fix for weariness with guaranteed results on this side. Instead, it is one way into a different way of life, full of treasure for those who are willing to pay attention to exactly where they are. Now it's mid-October. We're all still basking in the loveliness of finally being able to walk around more often mask-free. We're beginning to embrace what feels like near normalcy in our everyday lives. We're having a lovely fall. At least we were. Weariness possibly isn't in the air at the moment. It's certainly on the face of most of us after the third blizzard in March. But what's our incentive now? The upheaval of the past few years has caused us to seriously reconsider the trajectory of our lives. Some of us have never worked so hard, while others wound up with more downtime than ever before, with piles of time for reflection. We learned how to pivot, whether we wanted to or not, and how to carry on with amped up stress and anxiety. We were stopped in our tracks long enough to inspire us to radically reassess our career choices or just the commute. We analyzed what was absorbing our time, energy, and finances and wondered if it was bringing us joy, if I can quote Marie Kondo, slightly out of context. Ultimately, we all have a deep need to experience meaning and purpose in our lives, to come to some understanding of why we are in this place at this time with an unknown allotment of days. If any silver lining can be found in having our comfortable routines uprooted for a couple of years, it may be the recognition of a longing for more. What may have been buried by busyness or our distractions of choice suddenly had no cover for a while, and perhaps just long enough for us to notice something missing. So now, before we leave those reflections and resolutions in the dust, as we eagerly launch ourselves right back into life as per usual, we have a moment here, and maybe even at random points in the days and weeks to come, to just hold on a minute, take a deep breath, and be present for a while, and listen. Isaiah 55:8-9 explains why this is so important.
For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts.
I noted that the chosen analogy was not as the tallest trees are higher than the ground, or as the 10th floor is higher than the first. Those would describe large enough differences, you'd think, especially if you're falling down from them. Instead, the vastness of the gap between heaven and earth is used to describe the gulf that exists between our thoughts and God's, our ways and His. His perspective is so far superior. It's on a level beyond our comprehension. We're limited to seeing our small piece of the puzzle. God sees the finished work. How can we get a glimpse of that bigger view? What He sees of our world, what He sees in others around us, and what He sees even in ourselves. How can we be convinced to stop what we're doing long enough to really see? We have to pay attention.
As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts.
Our assumptions, our natural tendencies, our instincts, our thoughts, we humbly acknowledge need ongoing course correction, like that patient voice in the Google Maps app when we're headed in the wrong direction. In the story of Jacob, God gave him a vision of angels going up and down from heaven to earth, going about their business in the world. He was so affected by that vision that when he woke up, he set an altar to mark the spot and named it Bethel, House of God. It was a nondescript patch of dirt and rock, nothing visibly unique about it, no permanent ladder marks. But this experience was life-altering for Jacob, and as recorded in Genesis 28:16, he said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." His eyes were opened to the divine presence in that moment, near the rugged patch of ground that he slept on that night, and it changed his whole perspective. Surely the Lord is also in the common places we find ourselves in, and we don't notice, because we're kind of preoccupied. And there's plenty to be preoccupied with these days, which is why I was surprised to find some insight about this from the 17th century. Blaise Pascal was a mathematician, physicist, theologian, and philosopher, a lot of things. And he had this assessment of the tendency of people in the 1600s. I found a picture of him. We never keep to the present. We recall the past. We anticipate the future as if we found it too slow in coming, and we're trying to hurry it up. Or we recall the past as if to stay its too rapid flight. We are so unwise that we wander in times that do not belong to us and do not think of the only one that does. We almost never think of the present, And if we do think of it, it is only to see what light it throws on our plans for the future. Thus, we never actually live, but hope to live. And since we are always planning how to be happy, it is inevitable that we should never be so. That's a bit harsh, maybe, but wow, it seems we haven't changed in 400 years. Is there some strange comfort in knowing this human affliction is not new? It's important to point out here that Pascal is not suggesting that we live for the present, where one could justify irresponsible whim gratification, but instead live in the present, as it is referred to in Matthew 6, verse 34.
Do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Let the day's own trouble be sufficient for the day.
Our conscious attention is like a precious natural resource, and like every natural resource, its power is limited. There's no way to calculate how much information the human brain can handle, but someone tried to do the math and estimated that if we totaled up all the information our brains receive every second from just the sensory neurons in our body, picking up sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell, our brains would be bombarded by about 11 million bits of information. Apparently, our conscious brains can handle about 60 bits, and everything else is processed by parts of our brain that operates largely unconsciously. Thank goodness. But 60 bits of bandwidth, no matter what a bit actually is, sounds so measly. Modern technology promised to save us piles of time by making everyday tasks quicker and easier, but we've managed to find many more uses for it, so our time-saving devices are hogging a good chunk of those 60 bits. It took a pandemic for us to realize that our various digital devices, while way better than nothing, were no match for actually spending time with people, talking face-to-face, offering or receiving a needed hug. Body language and some of those elusive social cues are lost in cyberspace somewhere. Zoom calls and FaceTime can't compete with being present. Susan Moore and Mary Reimer are a couple of renowned FaithWorks published authors. They turned a year of social distancing into an exercise of paying attention. Every Monday morning for a year, they sought out a different park bench and invited their surroundings to inspire them. They used different mediums, one of them poetry, and the other watercolor. And what started out as an excuse for two friends to keep in touch while adhering to gathering restrictions turned into a year of rich interaction and insight and a published account to encourage and inspire others. God can show up in every moment, in any place, and in every circumstance, and remind us of His presence if we're paying attention. The artist Georgia O'Keeffe gained recognition for her radical depiction of flowers. She explained that painting close-ups of flowers was a way of learning to look, a way of slowing down and taking things in as they really are. She suggests that a flower is relatively small, and although we have many associations with flowers, some of us more than others, no one really sees a flower. It's so small. We don't have the time, and to see takes time. Her motivation in taking a small flower and creating a huge image of it was to, in her words, make even busy New Yorkers take time to see what I see in flowers. Consider the lilies is a well-known illustration from Matthew 6, where God's care and attention to detail in frail and fleeting flowers is used as reassurance of how much more He cares for us. While it may not have been her motivation, it's like O'Keeffe used a megaphone to exaggerate that truth and make it inescapable. God sees our faith community. As we navigate the road ahead, we humbly stand with open hearts and hands, ready to embrace His plan that exceeds our thoughts and ways. God sees us and is waiting to share His thoughts and ways with us as individuals. Those nuggets of truth, treasures of fulfillment, and reminders of His love and grace that are planted all around us. All that is needed is our consent, our willingness to pay attention. Carol Penner eloquently summarized this in her poem, The God Who Calls. You are the God who calls. You are hiding in the pauses of the winter wind, whipping around the corners of my house. You are present in the space between the opening petals of the first spring crocus. You are there in the silence behind the crickets chirping on the hot summer evening. You are in the autumn, aching for what's been lost when all is fallen. You call to us from the other side of Eden, your voice emanating from deserts, dreams, whirlwinds, and burning bushes. And always on the mountaintop we find you, in wide vistas and clear air, whispering to us as we look down on all we know. I want you to be the God who calls me. Hear my late night, late life lament. I've missed the train for glory too many times to count. A no-show in the parade of saints, absent without cause in the angel army. I'm here today to say I want to hear. Help my unhearing. Let the words of my mouth speak out the meditations of your heart, truly, clearly, faithfully, today and always. Something always has our attention. Rob Bell, in his book, What is the Bible?, described the writers throughout the Bible as continually saying, open your eyes, look around, listen, and pay attention. God is always speaking. The whole thing is a word. And right here, right now, I can say, surely the Lord is in this place, and we know it well.